Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. Welcome to EIG's 30-second webinar on Hyperautomating Your Future. 90 days to hyperautomate your organization, driving competitive differentiation, and scaling RPA to intelligent automation. Thank you for joining us today. We appreciate that you're taking the time today to attend EIG's 30-second in a series of webinars on building an evolving resilient enterprise. Especially in light of the coronavirus pandemic and restrictions, we hope that your family are safe and healthy. This is the first webinar in the series with Nividus, and we're very excited to have them join the EIG team. And they're really bringing some very unique technology for us out here as far as scaling RPA, but taking it to another level, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We look forward to an interactive webinar, so please do place questions in the chat, which I see is happening right now, which is great. And then participate in the polling questions with the pollev.com/JimDeVries073 hyperlink that's in the chat room. Again, my name is Jim DeVries, president of Enhance International Group. EIG is a platform of 40+ consulting companies and SaaS providers dedicated to empowering your organization's workforce to expand and sustain your organization to become a resilient enterprise. Our goal is to provide collective, collaborative, experienced thought leadership to enable organizations to deliver self-sustaining margin growth, the competitive advantage on 90-day action plans. And you'll see here today how Nividus has even a 30-day plan. So definitely can show some good ROI in a very short period of time. We hope that you find it interesting. All the slides will be available to all the folks that registered. We'll be sending those out. So sit back and relax and enjoy the webinar. Since 2020 of last year, we've been holding webinars every week or every couple of weeks. And we focus on 4 different areas that we'll talk about in a minute. But we do have some upcoming webinars coming in June. We resume our new product introduction series, artificial intelligence and supply chain risk and resiliency, as well as digital twins. And with that, I'd like to introduce our guest speaker today, Alan Hester, president of Nividus. And he's been at Nividus since 2017, being first the user of Nividus and now becoming president. He has a lot to share. So Alan, a few words.
Thanks, Jim. It's great to be here today. Glad to be able to join you. As you said, I've been at Nividus for a few years now, long enough to both understand the company and the marketplace, and we're really excited about what we see companies doing with our technology. And obviously, that's what we're going to get more into today. So as we go through this, hopefully you'll see some things that will resonate with you and your particular company. And obviously, if there are any questions or you want a deeper dive into anything, certainly reach out to us and we can set something up separately to talk through that.
Great. Thanks, Alan. And just to let our listeners know that Shaylee Puri is also on the line with us. She'll be taking the questions in the chat room, and Eric Gigaldi also is here from Nividus to help out. So are there any questions we need to attend to right now, Shaylee? Are we good?
No, we are good. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So just a little background about EIG. We do look at technology as a great enabler, but we look at it from a people, process, data, and technology perspective, and really building that ecosystem. And we all know it starts with people. You know, you need to have good talent. We have providers like Predictive Index that help us out there. In the process excellence area, we focus on supply chain risk and resiliency with the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. And we have a number of providers for Lean Six Sigma. So we have a very deep bench in that area, as well as in data analytics and Industry 4.0. We have Creatosoft and other partners to help us out with bringing the data and then visualizing the data. And then from a technology perspective, of course, we have Nividus, we have Fuse Machines and a few other providers. So we're really trying to provide that end-to-end solution with all of our different partners. So with that, I'd like to just introduce Nividus. It's a very impressive company. It's ranked among the top RPA companies worldwide by Gartner and by Forrester. It was, you know, they said most innovative use of attended RPA by customers by Craig Leclerc, VP analyst at Forrester. And then the Everest Group has also ranked them as the most innovative use of attended RPA by customers. So Nividus is definitely very impressive and very honored to have them part of the EIG team. Alan?
Yeah, thanks. So just to dig a little bit deeper into that, obviously Nividus, we realize, is not a household name. And in fact, many people even have trouble pronouncing it when they first see it. And so we like to point out that in the work that we've been doing with Everest Group, which is an analyst company that keeps track of what's happening in this space, that we have been shown as one of the leading companies in terms of growth. When you see where we compare to other companies that maybe you are more familiar with, you hopefully realize that we're very serious about what we're doing, and we're seeing some great results, most importantly. So, you know, just to cover some history of the company, we have been around in this space for quite some time. This is our 10th year. And one of the things that's really a differentiator for us as compared to a lot of the other companies in this space is our pedigree. So many of the companies that are doing RPA have started out as RPA companies. So they're very focused on the task-based automation that RPA delivers. And that can be very valuable to a company, and it can have great ROI at a fairly low cost. But I think what our perspective is that the end-to-end automation of business processes is ultimately more important. And I think what we see happening in the market right now is that companies that are getting a little bit further down the path are starting to realize that themselves. So we see this cycle where a company brings a technology in and they have very successful pilot and or POC, and they're very happy about how everything is going. But then when they look at what it takes to scale that across their company, across their enterprise, that's when they start seeing some of the problems. And so our platform really addresses a lot of those issues. And we'll go into that in more detail later. But just to point out, we're doing this kind of work in lots of different industry verticals and seeing great success in doing it. And we work on the model of kind of land and expand, where we start our relationship with the company at a small level and then build over time. And because of that, we're very relationship focused in how we deal with our customers. And we try to only work with partners that have that same emphasis.
Thanks, Alan. And I love this end-to-end scalable outlook. I think that is the right way to go. That's what attracted me to your company. Very, very nice. So just we do have a full packed agenda, and as we go through the slides, please feel free at any time to write questions in the chat, and we'll get to them as we can. But again, we're going to start with the challenge, where to get started, and then how to develop speed and start small, as Alan said, the process, where to hyper automate in your business in the beginning. And then how can we look at it overall as that overall value proposition that Alan just mentioned, that it's an ecosystem question, not just a spot RPA question. And then how to get started with launching a 90-day action plan. So we'll get started again here. And with this, Alan?
Sure. Yeah, this is an interesting thing because a lot of people have heard this term hyperautomation, and it's something that was created by Gartner, and sometimes it seems to us like we should have paid them to create this term, because prior to hyperautomation hitting the scene, we were kind of lumped in with other RPA companies. And that's not really the right fit for us, because RPA on its own, as I said, is one piece of the puzzle, but it's not really the whole thing. And so what hyperautomation does, it kind of takes everything to a higher level, where it incorporates RPA technology with some important technologies, AI technologies, business process management technologies, that are all necessary to get to the point of that end-to-end process automation that we talked about. So the other thing that's worth noting is that hyperautomation is Gartner's term, but other analysts describe the same thing using a different term. Forrester calls it digital process automation. HFS calls it intelligent process automation. So you may hear this referred to in several different ways, but they're really all talking about the same thing, which is combining those technologies to meet this need of being able to automate things from end to end. And just to re-emphasize this point, for most other products that you find out there, this involves purchasing additional products or additional add-ons in order to do it. But if you build on the Nividus platform, you have everything that you need for hyperautomation out of the box.
Yeah, that is a very unique offering, that everything in the out of one single platform. And with that, I'm just going to go over what EIG talks about, the resilient digital ecosystem, and just a bit about the overall ecosystem, and then where Nividus fits in that ecosystem. It covers quite a number of the areas, as Alan mentioned. We break the ecosystem down into three pillars. The first pillar is data. We need to move from disparate data into a data ecosystem where data is treated as an asset for the company and is viewed as very, very important. Of course, in the beginning, data mining, you're going to be moving. A lot of folks try to move into RPA without doing enterprise information management, may even not even do data mining. And sometimes when we don't understand our data clearly, or we don't have a way to make sure that our data is treated as an asset, it can get away from you. So you can get quick hits, but over a long time, it's hard to build it up. So that's what we espouse overall on this data pillar. And then from a visibility perspective, SQL reporting, of course, has been around since the 1970s and 80s, and the BI reporting in the 2000s, let's say. But this pillar hasn't moved very fast until the advent of the digital twin and getting to real-time data. And so we'll see where this Nividus helps out on these fronts. And then on the third pillar, artificial intelligence, the greatest buzzword of the last 2 or 3 years. What does that involve? In the beginning, it was high-level programming, then low code, and then it's moved up to machine learning. And there's other pieces of AI than these, but these are the main ones. When we put together a checklist of where Nividus fits in here, I think you'll see a lot of this covered. As Alan mentioned before, I think it's very impressive to see the coverage of a single platform provider providing insight to all of these areas. So Alan, do you have any, a few words to add to this, comments?
Well, I think the thing that I will say is that really we got to this point of developing the platform the way it is with all of these capabilities because of how we have grown as a company, right? So our founders came from the business process management space where they were working on a product offering that they saw the product as a technology was very good, and yet adoption of it was not always successful because implementations had a very high failure rate, and there were a lot of problems with the implementation itself. And so we built Nividus as a company around trying to solve that as an issue so that the implementations are going to have a much better chance of success. And part of the way that we're accomplishing that is that a lot of that integration work that typically you have to wrestle with and do on your own is already built into the platform. So it gives you everything you need.
Wonderful. So just building on this to look at it from an ecosystem perspective, I think Alan's mentioned that, you know, a lot of this is based on business process management, a lot of Lean Six Sigma process redesign. If you look at the top of the top here, then we have digitization, you know, trying to get to that day-to-day level of bringing that data that's in our ERPs, but also building new systems with IoT to bring new data in so that when we get to intelligent process automation here in the yellow, we're actually moving and managing the data from the day in the life of the user. And then as far as, you know, advanced analytics and predictive analytics in a digital twin, I think it's just going to be a natural output of this. So of IPA or hyperautomation, as we call it today, we'll see the dividends of this. So linking it into that advanced analytics, predictive and prescriptive digital twin will be that next level of advancement. And then business process outsourcing is really when you've given up and you say you can't do it from a cost perspective. And the question is, hopefully you'll be able to figure it out within your own ecosystem. When I looked at this chart back in 2018, I just felt like there were a couple of things missing on it. Sorry. And one is enterprise information management, because keeping good data is very, very difficult. So that's pretty important in a digital transformation, as well as making sure that that new data and existing data remains cleaned and that we're using all that information. And I think Nividus leverages a lot of this to help out. And then as you grow and scale, you know, some kind of governance is required to make it work. So Alan, do you have any comments on this slide?
No, I don't think so. I think, you know, what you said, I would certainly agree with. It just, it depends what level you look at this at, how much you want to deep dive into the other technologies that you might think are missing here. But no, I think I'm good with what you said.
Oh, thank you. So with that, we'll move to a polling question. So hopefully everybody's been able to log into pollev.com/Jim DeVries 073. And this first polling question is a ranking question. And the question is, rank the top 3 or more areas that you plan to be involved in the next 12 months. So we have a lot of those areas that we mentioned: data mining, process mining, of course, RPA, digital twin, machine learning, OCR, all the acronyms, every acronym that you can think of, all the buzzwords are here. And if they're not here, you can add them in the chat. So I appreciate you responding and just sharing with us what are the top 2 or 3 or if you go further in the ranking, that's great. But you can hit submit after you choose your top 3 or 4, and you can go back and change them. That's fine too. So Alan, what are you seeing out there as far as your predecessors or things that work well adjoined to what you are working on?
I think, we're going to talk about this a little bit later when we start talking about the mechanics of hyper automation and the evolution that got us to that point. But that all of the AI related technologies are becoming really important as it relates to automation, because it enables you to automate so much more than you can without it. And so people are starting to realize that and leverage that, and especially in the intelligent document processing space, where I would say that's absolutely booming at this point. People who are looking to do things like invoice processing and other automated ways of pulling structured data out of unstructured documents, and all the AI technologies come into play when you're doing that.
That's great. So do we have any, thanks, Alan, very insightful. Do we have any comments in the chat? If not,
One question we had, so basically the person is asking that quite apart the semantic matters like automation or its hyperversion, surely the key is the business outcomes and organizations such as Nividus helps companies achieve. So probably the question is more on the outcome side, if Alan or you can answer that.
Yeah, definitely. I think from our standpoint, and Jim, you can give your view on this as well, but we try to be very focused on the solution side of things. And one of the bad habits that I think we have fallen into as a technology company is that, many of our leaders and the people working in our company, we are very engrossed in technology. And so we understand it well. We know all the acronyms, we know all the buzzwords. That's how we talk and we interact with each other. But what we have struggled to do is to put what we're doing in terms that a company from the outside that's not as immersed in technology can understand what the benefits to their business are. So it shouldn't be necessary for you to get a PhD in technology to understand how these technologies are going to benefit your business. So you're exactly right. And I would say, if you are interested in understanding how other companies have achieved great results by using these technologies, which I think is a good way to learn the answer to this, I would encourage you to take a good look at the case studies section of our website, because we have that broken down by industry vertical, lots of different case studies that will tell you in a decent amount of detail how they have leveraged these technologies and what kind of business results have been produced from that.
it's hard to top that answer, Alan. That was very, very well said. As a practitioner, I'd say it's all about the outcomes. And I completely agree with everything Alan said. So we will definitely get at that. But yeah, we don't want to be looking for the magic button or something like that. That's not what's going to sustain the change and drive improvements. And we need to be fixing our underlying processes. We don't want to be automating broken processes. And that's what I like about this solution, is that we're really looking at things end to end and optimizing the process as we go along. With that, I'll just kind of
Jim,
move on.
before we
Okay.
move on, there is
Sure.
another question probably you will want to answer. What do we mean by digital twins? Can you expand a little bit more on that?
Digital twin is, in simple terms, it's a replication of the data that's in your systems. Generally, you're choosing multiple systems, and it's a complete copy of everything that you have in your, let's say, your ERP. And then in that system, you can then do data analysis and manipulation on the data. Most ERPs, if you start doing run queries or do any data analysis on them, it brings down the system, and the users then can't use the system very well effectively. So digital twins allows you to build this complete carbon copy of all of your data streams. You can join multiple data streams from multiple different environments, from Excel all the way to an ERP, to any data management system. And then in that data set, you can actually start analyzing it and feeding back in real time what needs to be done and to fix things. And you can start creating rules and decision making around it. I don't know, Alan, you want to add anything to that?
No, I agree with what you're saying, and I certainly have seen this in real life in many instances where the exact situation you're describing. It's not that the reporting is not possible out of the ERP or the database tied to the ERP, but there's operational concerns that make it so that it's not a good idea to do that reporting out of the system directly. And so it's much better to do reporting out of a replica. And many companies wrestle with whether or not that has to be real time or not. And in most cases, it's near time, so that it's not to the microsecond, but it's within seconds of the original.
Yeah, there's no such thing as pure real time, to your point.
Yeah.
So we don't get caught up in that, to your point. But you can actually, one of our partners, Creatisoft, specializes in creative. It's called Creatisoft, but they specialize in digital twins, in taking that near real time data, let's call it, and then performing prescriptive analytics on it, and actually giving people route guides on what they should do next in any environment, from a hospital to a production floor to supply chain, or a call center, because the question is always, what do you do next in making decisions? And RPA can help out quite a bit on the processes that are known. But once you get to that next level where you want to understand what we don't know and start putting reasoning in it, you get to prescriptive statistics, pretty advanced. You definitely want to start with RPA to get going and start building your data. All right, I think we better move on. Alan? So we kind of already talked a little bit about what RPA is a bit.
Yeah, I think probably most of you understand this. And so I'll just summarize this at a high level by saying our RPA is a technology. It doesn't involve any physical robots, which is an area of confusion for some people, because in RPA, we talk a lot about bots, but it's really all software based. And it's really doing tasks on systems that are typically done by a human. And that part of it is not unique, right? Any program you do is going to do some tasks for you. The thing that's unique about it is that it's interfacing with the systems through the user interface. So it's working in the same way that a human user would. And what that does for you is a lot of very significant things. Number one, it makes it possible for you to automate systems without using any programming at all. So because you're just teaching the bots to do things the same way humans do that, as long as you understand how the humans do it, then you can teach the bots. The other really cool advantage is that if the systems that you're automating don't have an API, or maybe you don't have the people with the right skill set or the proper documentation or even licensing to do that, then you can do automation anyway without an API using RPA, because you are accessing the system through the user interface, not through code. And so that's the big point to emphasize here. It's just a different way of accomplishing the automations that historically would be big, complicated, long, expensive development projects.
Thanks, Alan.
So looking at kind of the evolution of how we got to the point of hyperautomation, there are a lot of different steps here that you probably recognize. And I already kind of talked about our journey as a company, where we started in the BPMS or IBPMS space once that was created as a term. But essentially from the workflow space, right, where you were trying to automate these end-to-end processes that included primarily human tasks, but in the case where the task itself could be automated, that was done through code or some kind of low code or no code interface, but essentially programming it. And that kind of evolved over time as more technologies came into play. But the thing that has really leapt us forward quite a bit that has happened in the past couple of years is what we have seen happening in the artificial intelligence space. So not to underplay all of the other steps that led up to that, but the artificial intelligence is really what has taken this whole set of technologies to a completely new and different level, where we're able to do far more reasoning type things on the system, right? So, it used to be you could always do some kind of rules processing. If you look at the chart here, the first step is rules. And if you can follow a flow chart and teach the computer, the software, how to follow that, then you can follow those simple rules. But with AI in the mix, you're able to automate so much more complicated things, because you don't have to have explicit rules all the time. It can be more implicit as you look at machine learning and the capabilities that brings to the table. As long as you have a large data set to work from as a foundation, then you can basically say to the computer, hey, use this data set, we'll build this model based on this data set, and make your best judgment for what to do next, or what the answer is based on what you already know, what you've already seen. And that's something that was completely unimaginable prior to the emergence of the AI technologies that we have today. And that was essential to getting us to the point where we're at right now with hyperautomation, where we're able to substantially automate end-to-end processes that will fully automate, in some cases, very complex systems and processes. But then also the other piece of hyperautomation that maybe I haven't emphasized yet, but is very important, is recognizing that there are some tasks that will always be done by a human, and they need to be. And this is another area where traditional RPA falls down, because they talk about human in the loop, and they talk about things that a bot might get hung up on that it would need help with. But when it comes to a completely manual step accomplished by a human, there's no way to put that into a traditional RPA system. But with hyperautomation and that BPM capability that you have built in, you do have the ability to do that. So you can do those complete end-to-end business processes that include human performed steps, as well as bot performed steps, as well as hybrid steps that might involve both. And that's a significant advantage.
I like to call it I don't know if it's right, Alan, but I call it like the day in the life of the user. How are we enabling them to have a better day?
Yeah, I think early on, it's interesting the evolution that we've gone through with this technology, because early on, people were a little bit upset. It was kind of the bots are coming for our jobs. No one's going to have any work. But I think now people have kind of accepted it for what it really is, which is the things that we're asking the bots to do are things that aren't really a critical part of your job anyway, right? When we look at the human employees that we have in our companies, we want them to be doing the highest value tasks that they could possibly do for the company, not these menial repetitive tasks that are just wasting their time.
Excellent. So the possibilities are limitless, huh, Alan?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of different charts that we can put up there to show opportunities within your organization that might exist for automation in general. And many of those we have built more into solutions because we have implemented them so many times that we have kind of a core solution, that it's not as easy as just pulling off of the shelf, but in some cases it leads to an end result very, very quickly. And a good example is one of the ones we see up there, invoice processing. We see this time and time again because it's a struggle for so many companies and they're spending so much manual time on it. And it's for us, it's very simple and easy to implement a solution in this space, because it's just a matter of data, which we already talked about, and practice in doing it. And now we have done it so many times that it's kind of easy to take something like that. And we have the same kind of thing emerging in lots of other areas as well. But I just point that out because that's really a booming area right now in terms of implementations. The other thing that I'll say here, which kind of makes it even simpler for you to wrap your head around it. If you're thinking about how you would use this in your company, or how any company would use this, typically you can think of lots of processes where you're using email or spreadsheets as a big part of the business process. And all of those cases are areas where there's an opportunity for automation typically, because what you're doing almost all the time is you're using a human or asking a human to serve as the integration point between systems that aren't currently well integrated. And so they're having to do that manually by maybe pulling data and copying and pasting it from one place to another, or pulling a bunch of data into Excel to be able to report on it all together. So there are lots of different iterations for how it can take place, but the end result is that it makes it very easy for you to identify areas of opportunity in your organization by just following the trail of the emails and the Excel spreadsheets.
Excellent. So with that, we'll go to a polling question on if you're running any form of automation today in your company. A is you're currently running. B is you've done some proof of concept. You're planning to explore in the next 12 months, or are there no plans to explore in the near future, or none of these? So if you could respond to this and just give us an idea of where you're at, so when we go through the next sections, we better understand the audience and where you guys are coming from. Is there any questions coming in?
Yep. There is one question related to predictive analysis. So can Alan probably describe the role of predictive analysis and their parameters?
Yeah, so one of the things that we show in our regular demo, and maybe many of you have not seen this, but we build we build an automation around the loan origination process, because that's a process that most people understand. You've gotten some kind of loan, or you've gotten some kind of mortgage in your lifetime, and you know it involves collecting a bunch of data and putting it together and doing credit checks, and lots of discrete steps are involved that require a lot of manual work, as well as referring to a lot of different systems. And so what we have in this demo is, when the loan gets to the underwriting stage, which is where they're making the final decision on whether or not the loan should be approved. Typically, the underwriter is going to look at all of the data that has been submitted by the borrower or potential borrower up to that point, plus all the supplementary information coming from other sources. So, it'll be information on what is their income, and a verification of their income. What is the house that they live in is the house that they're buying going to be the house that they live in, and what's their history of buying other houses in the past and making the payments, as well as their credit history, and various things related to the borrowers and to the house that they're buying, if it's a mortgage, or to whatever the collateral is, if it's something else. But in this particular case, we've given an example of predictive analytics that says, hey, let's, in addition to giving the underwriter information about the application itself, let's compare this application to all of the applications that have come before it, and come up with a determination of what's the chances of fraud in this particular loan, so that the underwriter will know with some degree of certainty that if they approve this loan, that it's not going to be fraudulent in any way. And so, based on all of the data that has come before it, the model is built, the comparison is done. And then when the underwriter gets to that step in the process where they have to say, this is approved or it's denied, they will see that the bot inserts a little piece of data in there that says the fraud propensity in this case is either high or it's low, and what is the confidence level in that rating that's coming from the bot. And so that's just an additional data point. And in some cases, in some workflows, you might say you want to make the bot the final decision maker, and that could be fully automated. In this case, it's just kind of an additional piece of data that the underwriter has access to help them make a good decision. So that's just one example of predictive analytics. There are certainly many, many more. And one of the great things that we have built into our platform is the capability to build custom models like that on your own, so that you can do not just predictive analytics, but you can also do sentiment analysis, and you can do a lot of the higher level AI functionality that typically comes in a much more expensive platform, and just as a standalone piece of software. And here we have it as part of our complete platform offering.
Thanks, Alan. So I think we've covered a lot of these topics, so we'll probably cover them fairly fast. And it is the speed area that we're talking about, and what are fast ROI proven hyper automation opportunities. I think we've mentioned a number of these. If you look at your whole ecosystem, from product development, centralized services, sales, and production, we've been focused on a lot of these centralized services, and that's obviously a good place to start. There's obviously good opportunities in repetitive areas in manufacturing, especially in transportation, the paperwork that's involved there. And of course, sales, if you're doing high volume sales, are you doing engineering to order type of sales? So depending on your organization, these will become more prevalent. in the beginning, of course, you want to look at your high repetitive areas. And with that, finance and accounting, even when you say that, it's a central service, and there's quite a number of areas, as Alan will share with us, on opportunities to improve from an RPA perspective and hyperautomation perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting because what we see typically when companies get started with automation, they're almost always starting with some kind of back office activities, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's something either in finance or something in HR. And that's part of the reason why we're seeing such widespread adoption of these kinds of technologies, because it applies to every company. Every company has struggles with this, and it's typically most prevalent in these shared service type areas. So, within finance, you'll see here is just a handful of different things where automation can play a very significant role, but there are so many more. And what we see is that companies are doing things from automating individual tasks through automating the full end-to-end process. And part of the great thing about this technology that we haven't really talked too much about already is that it allows you to take that incremental iterative approach, and you don't get penalized for it, right? So in some cases, when you do a small project instead of doing a large project, you kind of get penalized in that the overall project then takes longer to finish. But with these technologies, you don't really have that penalty so much because of the fact that everything that you need to glue it together is all part of the same platform already. So it's a great approach to take, not just from the standpoint of being able to amortize your investment, but also from the standpoint of managing risk, and most often building internal support for what you're doing. So in many cases, there's companies that will have a champion within the company that will be pushing these kinds of initiatives, but they might not have full control over all of the purse strings, all of the funding that's necessary to do this implementation enterprise-wide. And so they have to build kind of a coalition where you get people on your side based on what they have seen, the value that gets delivered. And these technologies are very, very well suited for that kind of an implementation path.
Great, Alan. And the next slide is just a placeholder for the folks. If you're looking for areas, it's basically carte blanche across the board in finance and accounting. And we could spend 10, 15 minutes or an hour on any one of these areas and explaining case studies, but it's across the board. We have identified procure to pay as an area. If we look at our high level process, we all know that, of course, we want to deliver, manage this process effectively. There's a lot of challenges in this area. One of the biggest ones, of course, is right in the middle there, three-way match, invoice, purchase order, and receiving report. Gaining that match and dealing with discrepancies on both the front end and procure to pay and invoice to cash on the back end is one of the greatest challenges. And the tools here can help tremendously. And Alan will share with us a case study here on a leading drink and brewing company.
Yeah, so I think in this particular case, one of the things that's interesting about the technology is that when RPA first came out, I think there was an intention to keep it away from customers, right? To keep it away from end users, that it was better suited to be a back office kind of thing. But I think over time, what we're seeing is the benefits that RPA and automation, intelligent automation, hyperautomation, whatever you want to call it, can pay in terms of customer satisfaction and customer experience, and even employee satisfaction, employee experience. And so this was one of those cases where we had a company that was processing a tremendous amount of invoices every month from lots of different vendors. This is one of the reasons why we see invoice processing as such an emerging area for the use of this technology, is because you don't really have any control over how you receive your invoices, right? Every company does their invoices a little bit differently. And it's not something that you can say, hey, please, next time you send me an invoice, make it look like this so that I can process it easier. They will just laugh at you, right? And so because of that, it makes it very, very difficult to come up with a great way of automating that until you add artificial intelligence capabilities into the mix, because then you could build bots that are smart enough to be able to pick out the information you need, regardless of what that invoice looks like. So the fact that it's an invoice, it knows that it's looking for a certain number or a certain number of fields of data on that invoice, and it's able to find them regardless of what that invoice really looks like. And in this particular case, as Jim said, we're doing not just the processing of the invoice itself, but also doing the two-way and three-way match against the PO and GRN, and giving a great interface for being able to resolve that, so that there are clear visual indicators that will show someone who's reviewing it where there are any exceptions and what those exceptions may be, so that they can quickly and easily resolve everything. And so we could see in this case, there were 90% reduction in manual effort, 85% improvement in turnaround time, and 50% savings in terms of the full-time employees' time spent doing this task.
Thanks, Alan. So I'm going to skip ahead to a few slides here, and we're going to go right into this slide, as far as I want to give you a minute or two to talk about intelligent document processing.
Yeah, I feel like we've already touched on this quite a bit, but it has been an interesting evolution for us as a company, because initially this wasn't even on our radar screen, right? We knew we were in the hyperautomation space, and we knew that the AI components that we had as part of hyperautomation made document processing possible, and that there were some case studies where we had already done that. But looking at intelligent document processing more as a standalone capability or a product offering of its own really wasn't something that even occurred to us until the Everest group came to us a little over a year ago and said, hey, we're putting together this peak matrix for intelligent document processing, and your platform has all the capabilities to do this. Do you want us to include you in it? And so we went through the whole evaluation process. And one of the things that we learned is that there are tons of companies out there that are looking for solutions in this space. And it's complicated, right? The companies are struggling with doing this, and the leaders in the space are just ripping people off. I mean, I don't want to I should probably be more politically correct in how I talk about this, but they're doing transaction-based pricing that they get you hooked in and get you started on a process, and you get kind of hooked on the part where you don't have to have as many people involved in it, or in some cases you don't have to have any people involved in it. But then when you crank up the volume of documents that you're processing, you can realize that it's actually costing you far more than the people would have cost you to do the same thing. And so this is where our licensing model has made a huge, huge difference for companies because we don't have any transaction-based pricing for this. And so when you build a solution on our platform, it doesn't matter how many pages you're going to process, how many documents you're going to process, how many document types you're going to process. You're not going to pay extra for any of that. And that is a huge, huge advantage to companies that are growing or scaling or looking to make more with the resources that they already have involved in these processes. So I think, we're really excited about the fact that we have been acknowledged in this space now after kind of going into it, not quite kicking and screaming, but it certainly was not on our radar screen. But as I've already said, we're seeing a tremendous amount of activity in this space right now. It's very, very appealing for people to automate as much of this as they can.
Thanks, Alan. I think very insightful for us all to learn a little bit more about this. So thanks for sharing. We're coming at the top of the hour. If folks have to drop off, that's fine. We're going to try to wrap it up here in the next 5-10 minutes. If there's any questions, please feel free to ask your questions in the chat room. If there's anything coming up, we'll stop ourselves to make sure we answer those questions right away. With that, we'll just go to where to automate within your business. I think we've covered most of this. Again, if you look at your process, as Porter did, your end-to-end processes, Alan brought up that we've generally focused on the centralized services areas because we're afraid to interact with the customer. But where you really gain the bang for the buck is when you're working with suppliers and customers and you're able to automate these processes and allowing everybody to create their own invoices the way they want to create their invoices, and linking the data together so the people that are on the floor moving the goods around aren't spending 50% of their time trying to match things and doing paperwork. So the opportunities are pretty much boundless when it comes to hyperautomation across all parts of your business. I really like the service example that is coming up with, and I wanted to get to this one, the service desk automation, Alan.
Yeah, this is actually a quick and easy one, really. I think it's something that everyone's familiar with. You're handling support in whatever kind of case it is in your particular business. Maybe you're supporting end users in the field for a product, or maybe it's for a process, or maybe it's for some other reason. And you get in a bunch of things via email, and those have to be turned into tickets that are getting created in your ticketing system and prioritized in some way. And so using that same kind of engine that we talked about earlier for creating a machine learning model, we were able to create a machine learning model for taking the information out of these new inquiries coming in and being able to prioritize them and put them into the ticketing system in a completely automated way. So obviously this is a great advantage from a customer service standpoint.
So I've seen this done. This makes a huge difference. I think we'll just skip the polling question and really let's get down to the value of this, because I think that's what people want to see. I think this is I think we've covered this quite a bit already, moving from task, process, and orchestration into business reinvention. So this is a summary of what we discussed a little bit before, but I think this is an important slide, Alan, if you would share.
Yeah, I won't say too much about this, but this just kind of at a high level gives you the different components of our platform. And the studio, I'll point out a couple of things that are a little bit different versus other systems that you might have encountered out there. So for us, the studio development environment, many companies don't choose to use this at all. But if you want to build your own capabilities in-house for building and maintaining these kinds of automations. It doesn't take a developer to do it. It's a visual development environment, and it's pretty user friendly. Anyone who's tech savvy and understands the processes that they're automating should have no problem in doing it. But the other really cool thing about it is that all of the complete end-to-end automation is accomplished using that same studio. And so that means two key advantages for the company. Number one, it makes it quicker and easier to build the end-to-end solution. But number two, and maybe more importantly, it makes it easier and faster to train people on how to do it because they're only using a single tool for it. The control center is a portal application. This is something that each company really only needs one control center. And this is where all the bots are controlled. This is where you get all of your reporting and dashboards. But this is also where the humans interact with the system for any human tasks that they're going to accomplish. So this is a big differentiator between our control center and what other products might call an orchestrator or something else, because this is where all of those human tasks are going to happen. One other thing that I'll just throw in there, we do have a general purpose analytics and reporting engine built into the control center that has a lot of really nice functionality, not just for reporting on the process data, but for bringing in business data from external sources as well. So you can get real business reporting out of the same platform. And then the last piece that you see there are the bots themselves. And these are out there running on user class machines or usually VMs. And they just need their own machine, their own account, and it will be set up in the same way you would set up a user to accomplish that same kind of task. The one other thing that I'll point out is that we do have a separate smart bot library as well. And that's where all of our AI functionality lives. And the reason why we have that separated out is because it's not really required in many cases. So it makes the installation and implementation process much easier to keep that out of it if it's not required. And then one other piece that I'll mention before we move on is that all pieces of this platform are built by Nividus. So this isn't technology that we're licensing from someone else. This is all built by us. And because of that, we have a lot of flexibility when it comes to implementation, as well as when it comes to licensing in comparison to other companies that are out there.
Great. Thanks, Alan. So I'll just cover this slide rather quickly. As far as the challenges, when I looked at this slide, we're talking about a lot of financial challenges, but often in engineering and new product introductions, you may not have a lot of repetitive manual tasks, but it'd be tasks that are very complicated and are interfaced with outdated and flexible systems and a lot of paper-based processes with lots of notes on them that require some AI intelligence to help out. And then there's a lack of visibility of that end-to-end new product introduction process, let's say for engineering or just updating engineering drawings. And then as far as multiple inconsistency in data sources, having that centralized set of data, the data about the data, that core data set, having bots helping you out with that on your business process management is incredibly useful. And then it helps employees to focus on what is the right thing at the right time. There's a lot of hurry up and wait in engineering and new product introduction design, and then changing project expectations. So I look at it a lot more open. Of course, you want to look at it where the repetitive tasks are and get yourself going, but there's a lot of opportunity to help and enable the workforce to perform at a level much higher than they are today, so that they can spend more time doing what they're really paid to do, for instance, in engineering or research and development. So I think these are spaces that there's a lot more to come, a lot more opportunities, but building those banks and vaults of understanding how to use the bots and the artificial intelligence effectively, and the high repetitive manual tasks will help you grow as a company and make you more competitive in the future. So just wanted to put that in, but I think we want to get to how to unleash this 90-day action plan. We'll just go. I love this slide, Alan. If you would share with this slide in the following slide.
Yeah, this is just kind of a high level view of the methodology that we follow when doing these projects. And, you know, it's like any methodology, it certainly has different variations that you might use depending on the particular situation. But one of the things that we have found, and I'd say it's probably the most important piece of this, is that a lot of companies, when they look at this technology, they see the value and they want to do something about it, but they just don't know what to do. They don't know where to get started. And so that's why that discovery process at the very beginning is so important. And this is something where we will help companies when they need it to step in and figure out where is the best place to get started. And we'll meet with their stakeholders, and we'll sometimes act more as a fly on the wall, or sometimes be more of facilitators, and sometimes be much more involved in the process, depending on what their needs are. But the point is that it takes a lot of work to understand from an end-to-end enterprise standpoint, what are all the processes, and where are the areas where we can see as the low-hanging fruit, you know, because that's where you want to get started. You want to start on those areas that are going to be easy to implement, and they're going to be delivering high business value.
Great. And
so this kind of just is a natural extension of that. We have what we call the quick start, which is designed for companies that are looking to either get started for the first time or maybe get restarted for whatever reason. And what this does is it bundles up everything you need in terms of the licensing as well as all the services to deliver something to production within 4 weeks. So we're not talking about a pilot or a POC. We're talking about something that will be in production and delivering value to your company. And that entire process will be done by the end of 4 weeks. And so this is a great way to get started in a very low risk way. And so for companies, we're finding that this is a great way to sell this internally, especially in those cases like what I talked about before, where you're trying to build an internal coalition and some kind of consensus around making bigger investments in this. So, you know, to get started with the quick start usually is going to be one person's signature authority to get it approved, because it's that insignificant of an expense. And so, you know, this can be a great way to start the journey.
Love it. Love it. So with that, we're going to wrap up here with some key learnings. I think you heard it loud and clear from Alan. You know, start small, you know, look at those high volume areas and develop those 4-week kind of plans. Generally in the financial areas is probably your low hanging fruit. Reinvest those benefits as you've gained and build a scalable model for your overall program. And then we learned that, you know, hyperautomation enables your RPA bots to integrate with your disparate systems. So, and of course, that's going to build resiliency. And of course, we learned early on that the hyperautomation is, and what Nividus platform has, it does draw upon a significant part of the digital transformation journey, which is generally on every leader's top 10 list or top 3 list, I would say. And then as Alan wrapped up here, and the time to value can be easily achieved in 30 to 60 days of launch. And there's not a lot of investments that you can do out there that have that kind of high return. Alan, any closing comments?
No, I think I certainly enjoyed spending time with you today, and appreciate the opportunity to be here. We will welcome any follow-up questions or any interest in maybe a demo that someone might have. We certainly would be happy to facilitate that.
Thanks, Alan. And I'll just wrap it up a bit with, we do have a number of webinars upcoming in June with the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium, new product introduction, artificial intelligence, digital twins, and of course, de-risking and more on digital twins. So we do have, there was a question about digital twins. We will be having more webinars about that. We do already have a webinar that's out there that you can look on the EIG website, www.consultingeig.com, and find that. And again, we are aligned to people, process, data, and technology. We have 40 plus partners. And of course, Alan, if you want to have any additional closing comments, welcome you to.
No, I don't have any additional comments. Just
Okay.
thank you all for joining us today. Hope you have a great day.